Okay. I'll give her another minute to join. All right, another minute. See if anyone else comes in. We got about 38. The attendance is open on iClicker, by the way. If you want to sign in, you can check your attendance. Okay. All right, I'll get started. Oh my God, Tom, what the hell is that background? What is that?
I said toilet paper will be the currency one day.
No,
We
forget
will
forget
we will
bit
hold
bit
it.
yeah, forget Bitcoin. It's two ply, right? Okay. Um, all right. Let me give you an update on the grading things. I know you all were very engaged in that last class. We had a 2 hour faculty meeting. Oh God, Lisa, we had a 2 hour faculty meeting on when I moved into my house. There were actually bidets in every toilet. I don't know why. I had them all removed. Maybe not the smartest move. I don't know. Anyway, we had a 2 hour faculty meeting um, last Friday, and we did not reach a resolution. We had a lot of discussions with a lot of different ideas, um, and if I can summarize it briefly, it's that we are very, very aware of all the competing views in this issue, and we weren't quite ready to reach a resolution. We have another meeting on Friday. We may reach a resolution sooner than that. I don't know, but it's still in the air. From my perspective, it doesn't really matter what the school does. And let me explain why. Um, I'm going to give the same exam I was going to give anyway. I haven't written it yet, don't worry, but I will give the same exam. And I will grade it the exact same way I would grade it usually. Same curve, same everything. I'll give the registrar grades, and they can do whatever they want with it. They can either mark you as pass or fail. I don't care. I will give you your grades. So if you, for whatever reason, have a pass fail option, you'll see what you got, A, B, C, or D. I'll know what you got. You'll know what you got. It just won't go in your transcript if that's the option. So really, it makes zero difference to me what the faculty ultimately decides. The only difference it makes is if someone says, "Oh, great, pass fail," um, I can just stop studying and stop paying attention. That's a no-no. That won't work well for me. So if that's what you want to do, then we have a problem. But as long as you take this class as seriously as you've taken all semester, hopefully more towards the end, we'll be okay. Are there any questions or anything anyone wants to ask about that? I don't have an update because the school's still thinking it through, but I want to at least give you the status where we are now.
I have a question, sir.
Yes, go ahead. Is that Mike?
Yes, sir.
Go ahead.
Uh,
I think Andrew might be on deck as well. Go ahead.
um, Sorry, I was eating a cheeseburger. So are they actually still thinking about like just flat out grades then, and not doing anything but grades? That's an option for them.
I don't want to speak for what the options are, but you have all the options on the table. What I would say is that in any given semester, there are some people who have certain hardships, not corona related, but in general they have hardships. And in the past, school has done things to alleviate it on a case by case basis. So I doubt the answer is we stay exactly the same. I think that's an unlikely outcome, but I don't want to get ahead of where we are. Angie, I think your hand was up also.
Yes, we received an email today from the dean, and it said something regarding a possibility of taking exams on campus.
Yeah, yeah. Let's just say, for argument's sake, that by June or July, this thing, whatever it is, the stay-at-home order goes away. I don't know that that's possible, but let's say it is. One option might be, instead of taking your exam now, you defer it till the summer. And let me just make that point a little bit more clean. Every semester, at least one or two of my students can't take the final exam. They got into a car accident before the exam. They became sick. Their wife was in the hospital, right? Every year, this happens every year. At least one or two students has some sort of last minute, oh my God moment, and they can't take the exam. So what they end up doing is they actually take it the next semester the class is offered. So let's say someone's teaching Property 2 in the summer, they'll take the Property 2 exam in the summer. Let's say someone's taking Property 2 in the fall, they'll take it the next fall. It's kind of tricky because they may take it with a different professor. It may not be me. The reason why this is tricky is very often someone takes another professor, goes sits for my exam, and they have no idea what the hell to do. Right? I encourage them, if you want to sit for my exam, you should sit in my class. They never do it. So it's possible that we may just delay the proctoring or maybe write a second exam. Again, there are a lot of options on the table. I don't know the answer. Mike asks, what about summer school? Well, the calendar for the summer is set. I think Property 2 is usually offered in the summer. I'm not teaching it. It's not me. One of my colleagues is. So in theory, I guess you could take that person's exam. I don't know that's a good idea, but you could. Kevin, going to exit and rejoin because my connection is spotty. Yeah, join the club. My afternoon class today, my connection dropped 2 or 3 times. And this poor girl was on call, and she thought she was answering, and I wasn't responding because she thought her answer was wrong. My face was just frozen. It just looked like I was just staring at her. It was very disconcerting. Alexandra asked, that can interfere with summer class and internships. Yeah, assuming we have internships, right? I don't know what employers will do this summer. Do you think we'll still have summer classes? Yes, but they might be by Zoom, right? The same way you and I are in class now, they may hold summer classes online. I know. I can see your faces. Look, if the stay-at-home order is lifted by the summer, then you'll come to school. If the stay-at-home order remains in effect, you can't come to the building. I mean, even allowing people to the building to get their lockers is a big deal. We have to have you have to sign for time slots to even enter the building. Okay, Zoom's worth $3 billion. Yeah, whatever. Catherine asked, would the same grading policy apply then? Let me answer your question this way, Catherine. One of the reasons why we're so cautious about the grading policy is whatever we adopt now very likely might apply in the future, which means it could apply in the summer. And I don't want to be too grim, but the way these sorts of pandemics works is they subside and they flare up. So it's entirely possible everything's great over the summer, and come October, November, we have another stay-in-place order. Right? This may be part of our new normal, where for certain periods of the year we have to go into our cocoons and teach class with toilet paper backgrounds. Right? That just might be where we're headed. So whatever policy the school adopts now will very likely dictate how these situations are handled in the future, which is why we're being really careful. And I got to tell you, all the arguments that you guys were raising in class last week, we voiced. It's not like we're listening to you. We're trying to pick the least worst option, not the best option. There are no good options, but the least worst option is about all we could hope for. Okay, what else? Thank you for the shout out. You're welcome, Tom. And you can probably hear Miriam in the background. Yeah, there she is. Okay. Anything else? I sent you an email earlier about the schedule for the rest of the semester. Take a look at it. I think I got it more or less right. We have class today. That's the 31st. We have another class on April 2nd. Then we have class on April 7th. There's no class on April 9th. That's the holiday of Passover. I had originally canceled class on April 7th as well because I planned to go to New York to be with my parents. Not going to happen. So I'm here. You're welcome. So there's no class on the 9th. There's also, we do have class on the 14th. But I canceled class on the 16th. I don't have any good reason to have class that day. We have all the material covered and we're not behind. So there's no class on the 16th. On the 21st, I want to do a review session where I want to go over the final exam from last, I think it's from 2018, whatever the last time I taught this class was. I'll go over the final exam. And on the 23rd, which I think is our last actual class day, I'm just going to do office hours. I don't have any agenda, anything I want to teach. We'll just have a waiting room and you can come in as you wish. No, it's almost her bedtime. She's about to have bath time, so she's the baby that is. Mike asks, what day is the final? I don't have it handy. I think it's the. If anyone has a date, just put it in the chat. I don't have it handy. Is it the 9th? May 9th, yeah. There's a chance it may not be May 9th. We don't know. The exam may be postponed. But you should study as if it were May 9th, which if I had to guess what they're just going to do is let you take the exam with a proctoring by Zoom, I think it's not ideal. You'd use Examplify, you'd use whatever software, but you'll just take it online. And for my exam, it's not a big deal because it's an open book, right? It's very hard to cheat on my exam, right? It's really hard. If you try and copy someone else's essay, I'll know very quickly. For other professors who have multiple choice exams, it's easier to cheat, right? For other professors who have closed book exams, that's got to go. I mean, one of the things we discussed is having a closed book exam at home is a non-starter. It doesn't work. And when you write an exam, open book versus closed book, it's a very different process. Like there are different questions you ask with open book or closed book. You would have to frame it completely differently. So again, I'm not worried. My exam will be the same. I'll grade it the same. I'll give you your grades. And whatever goes in your transcript is a very low concern to me. It just doesn't matter what I put in your transcript. PF, credit, no credit, I don't really care. Anyone else?
I have a question.
Yes, go ahead, Elizabeth.
You said something about the finals maybe postponed?
Well, the dean put in his email that you may actually take the exams on campus. And one way that could work is when this stay-at-home order is lifted, you could, in theory, come to campus and take the exam there. Maybe over the summer. I don't know, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but that's a possibility. My guess is you just take your exams online. That'd be my prediction. But maybe some professors are going to be uncomfortable with that and they'll make you come in person later. I don't know. But yeah, I really don't care where you take it. It's not going to help you, right? Anyone giving you help is probably going to hurt you more than they're going to help you with my exam. You know, if you're trying to text someone, you're just going to waste your time. All right, what else? All right. Let's take a look at a poll question to get us thinking about our reading for today. Let's see if I can do this correctly. I'll just make sure I put the screen share on the right monitor, otherwise it's in very, very tiny window. Okay. All right, so your poll question is this. I'll read it to you. The City of New London took Suzette Kelo's home for a, quote, public use. The City of New London took Suzette Kelo's home for a public use. True or false? Okay, give me 30 seconds for that question, please. Caitlin says, help, I can't get into Reef. I am sorry, Caitlin. There's nothing I can do to help you. I feel bad, but I can't help you at all. Okay, another few seconds. All right. So if you noticed, we only had one case for today, which you may think, yay, but there's a lot going on in this case. We'll have some time to discuss it in some depth. So first off, who am I up to next? I forget who the next student is.
It's me, Robert Meredith.
Okay, Robert. Thank you, sir. So let's just take a look at the poll question, right? What does it mean the city of New London took Kelo's home? What does that word took mean? T-O-O-K. What does that mean?
Like a taking from eminent domain.
Okay, what's a taking?
A taking is where the government comes in and takes the land, or either it's self or for public use.
Okay. So what does it actually mean, though, to take a person's land? I know it sounds like a dumb question, but precisely, what does it mean to take land?
For them to transfer it or to make it usable in a certain way.
Okay, how did the city of New London want to make Kelo's home more usable?
They wanted to put a business that would pay more taxes.
Right, so who would have title to the property, Kelo or someone else?
Someone else.
Okay, right, so the basic definition of a taking, literally, is to transfer to ownership, right? It's to take title from A and transfer it to the government, right? The government takes control of Blackacre, right? Takes control of a piece of property. Okay? Meredith, who's next? Alexandria, I think you're next. Okay. Well, what happens, Alexandria, if the government doesn't actually take ownership of the property? What happens if the government tells you how to use your property? Is that a taking?
No.
No. What if the government tells you that you can't build anything on your land ever? You have to leave it empty. You get to keep it. You still have fee simple, but you can't build anything in your land ever. You can't do anything on it. You can go out camping.
That's more of like the zoning restrictions.
Ah, but are some zoning restrictions so onerous to violate the Constitution?
No. Yes.
Well, think about some of the cases we studied, right? What is the court determining when you have these zoning cases? What are they looking at?
They're usually looking at if it disadvantages a certain group.
But what's the standard by which courts usually assess if zoning laws are valid? What's that standard called?
Rational basis.
Is it ever possible for a zoning law to be unconstitutional?
Yes.
It's possible. Right, so what if, again, I'll give you the hypothetical, the government says you can never build anything in your land ever? Is that a taking?
It could be.
Could be. Good answer. Good answer. And the answer is it's very complicated. Thank you, Alexandria. Why am I putting Alexandria through these paces so early? The phrase taking in the Constitution is very complicated. And the Supreme Court has totally messed up this area of law. It's disgusting. I hate teaching this area because it's a disaster, right? You have all of these different tests to determine when there's a taking. The case today is easy. The government literally took ownership of Kelo's home and bulldozed her house, right? There's no doubt they took her house, right? If there's a bulldozer involved, there's a taking. But our studies for the remainder of this topic will not be so clear, right? In other topics, it will not be obvious that the government took property. In other cases, the government merely reduced the value of property. So the question we'll study next class is, how much is too much, right? How much of a reduction in value crosses the line and becomes a taking, right? Where do you draw that line? And there are a lot of lines to be drawn, right? So next class is, when is there a taking, right? We don't have to worry about that today because in today's class they demolished her house with a bulldozer, right? There's no doubt they took her property, right? This one's an easy one. But the harder part of this case is not the word taking, right? I put over here the text of the Fifth Amendment. It says, Well, Angie, one point. Kelo's house was moved, but not by the government. Private organizations paid to move it, right? So they moved it brick by brick. But let me read you the text of the Fifth Amendment. It says, "Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation." And it's framed in the negative, which makes it sort of hard to read. But let me state it in the positive. If the government takes your property for public use, the government must give you just compensation. A brief note on compensation, right? A brief note on compensation. All right. Compensation doesn't mean market value. All right. Just compensation does not mean market value. Just compensation means what the government deems reasonable. That's not very good, is it? Right? That's not very good, is it? Just compensation does not include people as moving costs, right? If you have to move somewhere, just compensation may not include legal fees, closing costs. Just compensation does not include sentimental value, right? People have an emotional attachment to a home that builds over many, many years. Just compensation really means an amount the government deems reasonable. And the courts can sometimes get involved if it's too low, but generally the government can set their price. Okay, I saw Mike had his hand up a minute ago. Mike, was that a hand or is it down?
No, well, I was thinking like, a lot of times, don't they just, it's the tax rolls, whatever's on the tax rolls, which a lot of times your house is worth a hell of a lot more than what the tax roll is.
Yeah, I think Catherine made a similar comment. She says, don't they use county taxes? And Kevin said, would you have to argue the government to increase the amount? Right. If you ever look at the property value assessments, it's usually less than your house is worth. But that might be a good measure that the government uses to decide it. But let me just, I'll get to the chats in a minute, but let me just state the question a little bit differently. Right? Let's say you bought your house for X, but the neighborhood is in a decline, right? It's the neighborhood's on a downward slope, and they say property values are worth less. And because the neighborhood is kind of going bad, you can't sell it for as much. They can actually use the fact the neighborhood's on a downward slope as a justification to pay you less. If that makes sense. All right. Catherine, they can tax and market value. Rebecca says, does the government have to identify how they came up with the amount for just compensation? It's a pretty opaque process, and usually they'll offer everyone on a block a similar amount. It's not a good measure, right? The MLS, the listing service, might be a useful guide, but there's often litigation, and this is a standard where the government gets some deference. But by the time your house is being taken by eminent domain, you're kind of already screwed because you have to move, you have to pay for a new house, you have closing costs, you have moving costs. That does not factor into it. Okay? There's a lot of litigation on eminent domain just compensation. So let's say you have a farm and the government wants to pay a pipeline or put a pipeline through your backyard. Usually the state sets a fixed rate for what a pipe, whatever the width is, how much they're going to pay for that exercise of eminent domain. It's not a lot. Or if the government wants to put a railroad track or a road through your house or through your property, there are various fixed rates at how much that's going to cost. Are there any other questions in the compensation element? I don't have too much on this. Mike asked about building the wall, of course. The wall does require the use of eminent domain. And a lot of these property owners, for example, argue that building a wall might cut off access to water supply and other types of resources. So in that regard, whatever the land in the middle of the valley is worth, it doesn't actually factor in lost earnings and lost potential for feeding livestock. So the numbers aren't very good. All right, other questions on this? No? Okay. So I briefly introduced the concept of taking, what a taking is. And I briefly introduced the concept of what public use means. I'm sorry, what just compensation means. The bulk of class today focuses on the phrase public use. Public use. Elizabeth, you here? No, I called you already. Chris, you here?
I'm here.
Chris, what does the phrase public use? Is that Lord of the Rings?
Yep.
I was actually in New Zealand and I visited where that was filmed. They actually built a life size, but they built an actual set in this area in those houses. It's a beautiful place.
Yep, they let it go a year so it looked right before the movies started filming.
It was very cool. They had big doors and little doors to try and get the sense of scale between the hobbits and the wizards. You were there for pre-production for The Hobbit. Very cool. Yes, it was a beautiful country, New Zealand. All right, Chris, what does the phrase public use mean?
Generally, it means like that when they do a taking, that it's going to be used for public use, so the general public will have some sort of enjoyment out of it or get a use out of it. And like in New London, it may be that a private citizen it gets a majority of the use, but the public still gets a use of it somehow.
Okay, Chris, so if I can repeat your definition, you say public use means use by the public?
Or used by the community as a whole, or by the area.
Okay. All right. Hey, Tom, you here?
Yes, sir.
So, Tom, we got a definition of a public use. God, that's ridiculous. We got a definition from Chris on what a public use is. What's a public purpose?
Public purpose.
What's the difference between public use and public purpose?
So public use, like Chris was saying, was something for everybody to use. Public person's purpose, I would assume, would be something along the lines of something to benefit everybody.
So not everyone can use it, but everyone might benefit from it.
Yeah. So, like for example, in the case, not to tell too much about the case, but the kind of the idea was it was supposed to help increase the revenue in that area because certain institutions left and certain other institutions were like, hey, we'll come there, but you need to basically build up that area for us to want to move.
Well, so Tom, let me ask you a follow-up. Let's look at the poll question then, Tom, okay? The city of New London took Suzette Kelo's home for public use. Is that true or false?
I put true.
Was that the standard the court applied? Did the court actually say that the New London plan was a public use?
Felt like they were implying it, but no, I guess not. If you're asking in that sense, so I'm just reading the holding. It's saying that their authority only extends to determining whether the city proposed condemnations are for public use within the meaning of the Fifth Amendment.
Oh, I know they say that. But what's the standard the court actually applies? Is it public use or is it a public purpose standard?
I guess it was public purpose.
I think so too. I think this one's false. And I think if you put true, I understand why you did it. But as we go through the Justice Stevens opinion, I think you'll see the court wasn't really considering, enough of this toilet paper, the court wasn't really considering the public use standard. To the contrary, I think the court was primarily looking at whether it was a public purpose. Because everyone agrees this land wasn't going to be used by the public. It wasn't a park, it wasn't a road, it wasn't a hospital, it wasn't a railway, right? It wasn't a common carrier. It was a private party. All right, so I think this one's false. Most of you got it wrong, but I understand why you put true. Now, let me actually demonstrate to you how I know personally that this land was not being used for a public use. So I have all these lovely pictures of the property. I put them in the video, which hopefully you watched. In 2012 or 13, I think shortly after I began teaching, I went to a conference at Yale, which is in Connecticut, in New Haven, which is not too far from New London, about 2 hours away. So I said, aha, Josh, I'm going to take a drive to New London and get some pictures of the Kelo properties. Like, okay, whatever. So first I start driving around town, and first I go to the place where the house was moved, and she mentioned that earlier. After Kelo was decided, they actually moved the house plank by plank across town, maybe a mile or two away, as basically a testament to this case. Then I went by the waterfront, which is where Kelo's home was located. And at the time, this is in 2012, I had my little video camera, which I was basically holding up, just waving around and filming everywhere I went. I thought I would make a movie out of it. And I make a wrong turn, and I inadvertently pull into a parking lot. I wasn't really paying attention. And then out of nowhere, this Jeep pulls in front of me and turns on its lights. I'm like, oh, crap. I pulled into the parking lot for General Dynamics, which is a military contractor. And the facility was across the street. I'm like, oh, my God. How am I going to explain this? So this huge guy, this guy was huge. He walks up to my car. He's like, what are you doing? I'm like, I'm a law professor. And I am filming the Kelo house across the street. And he just looks at me going, who are you? So then he asked for my license. I'm like, oh, crap, I'm getting arrested. No black site, but closed. And I said, look, I'll show you my camera. I'll delete all the pictures I took today. Just let me go. And I was there for maybe 15 minutes. I was like, oh, this guy's gonna get me arrested. And I said, look, just look at my camera. You can delete all the pictures. This was an accident. It was an honest mistake. And eventually he let me go. So I was happy. So I actually lost a lot of the good pictures I took. But anyway, I survived. But eventually got out of that parking lot, thank God. I made it across the street where I saw the Kelo home. Anyway, that was my story. Tell him to go to hell, you have rights. No. This is private property, Chris. This is private property. I was trespassing. Look, I made a wrong turn. It was perhaps negligent, but I was trespassing. I was on his land. I had no right to be there, especially with a freaking video camera and a military contractor site. Man, I was, crappy security. Well, yeah, there was no gate or anything. I just pulled into a parking lot because I thought I made a wrong turn. You said, dude, I'm Josh. No, I did not say that, Mike. I did not say I'm Josh Blackman who arrested me. Anyway, so that's my story. But I did go to the Kelo site. That was almost 8 years ago. Wow, it was a long time ago. The lot is still empty. Apparently, there's some feral cats live there. I didn't see the feral cats, but there are some feral cats who live on the vicinity. All right. Who's next? Randall, I think you're up next.
Yes, sir.
All right, Randall, you want to walk me through, please, the facts in Kelo versus City of New London?
Yes, sir. All right. So basically, in 2000, New London had a development plan to help revitalize the city. They were wanting to bring in more jobs. This would also increase their tax and other revenues, and basically revitalize the city because it had been deemed a distressed municipality.
Yeah. What do you know? Do you know what that means, Randall? Distressed municipality.
Just going by it, it seems like the city itself was suffering from hard times, and I think too they said that they lost a lot of jobs because the military had moved out. So they're basically just losing money, losing jobs, and trying to get their tax revenue back up.
Yeah. I mean, thanks so much. Thanks for that, Randall. So New London was one of these towns. It was in Connecticut, right by the shore, and it was economically distressed. They had double the rate of unemployment. Population was dropping. Industry was leaving, and it was in a pretty bad economic state. At that point, the New London Development Corporation was formed. And when you see the words development corporation, that means people who take property, right? For example, in New York, they have the Empire State Development Corporation or something like that. These are groups that are empowered with eminent domain. And they targeted an area of New London for economic revitalization called the Fort Trumbull area. The Fort Trumbull area. It was right by the water. Beautiful, beautiful place. I mean, it was stunning views of the Sound. In February of '98, Pfizer, it's a pharmaceutical company, they make, among other things, Viagra, announced that they would build a $300 million research facility in Fort Trumbull, right by the water. The state did some studies, and they determined that they would take about 90 acres on this huge lot in Fort Trumbull. And that would include taking over 100 private properties. In 2000, the city approved the plan, and they authorized the corporation to buy the land. And then about 10 months later, the city initiated condemnation proceedings. Who's next? Justin, you here? Justin?
Yes. Sorry.
So, Justin, let me ask you this question, please. Does the city go ahead and file legal proceedings right away? Is that their first course of action in these sorts of cases?
No, they tried to buy up all of the land for giving the just compensation and all of that.
Right. So the first step is they try to buy the land. Now, Justin, just how do you think that conversation goes? You know, knock, knock, knock. Hi, it's a really nice house. I'd like to buy it. How do you think that conversation usually goes?
Yes. So I had a question about this because you mentioned that they don't get a lot of money for just compensation, but here all but like 10 people sold, and I can't imagine how many were. So it seems like whatever tactic they use is really good. So I don't know if they're leaning on, I am with the government, I'm going to buy your property for this much, sign here, or I really don't understand. I don't know how they do it.
Oh, I can tell you how they do it. Anyone want to guess how this conversation goes? Anyone want to volunteer? I can do it, but it's probably better if someone else does it. Tom, I see you raising your hand, or you might be in the toilet. I can't quite tell with that backdrop.
I'm raising my hand.
Yeah. How do you think this conversation usually goes, Tom?
Probably they went to they probably did like a quick survey of who would be willing to sell. Probably went to the first person, told them, hey, I'm willing to pay this much, and then that person just, it's kind of started like a ripple effect is how I would look at it. So usually, I mean, think about it, I mean, for lack of better terms, like gentrification, like basically you get the first person as your foothold, your anchor, and then from there it starts just like.
Well, Tom, usually if you go to negotiate, what can the buyer always do if they don't like the price? Right? If someone makes an offer, right, if I make you an offer for your house and you don't like my price, what can you do?
I can say no, and then you'll just go to my neighbor.
Well, in this case, what happened? Can you say no?
No, you negotiate.
Who's that talking?
Lacey.
Lacey, you're next. Perfect. Right? Is there any negotiation, Lacey?
Yeah, if there's room to negotiate, you can submit appraisals, your argument for why it's worth more than they're asking.
And what if the government says we disagree?
Well, you can refuse to sell, and then they'll file a condemnation suit against you.
Exactly. What's a condemnation suit?
So it's essentially a suit where they file with the government that they're taking your land and that's what they've offered you. And you can answer and try to fight it, but the government will essentially decide what's going to happen to it and what you're taking.
Okay, very good. Yeah, very good. Thank you, Lacey. Right. So usually when you're negotiating at arm's length, party A makes an offer, party B says, no way. And then you go back, make another offer, counter offer. But here the government says, that's a really nice house. We're going to take it from you. We can do this the easy way or the hard way, right? The easy way is you just take our offer and then you take our money and go home and you buy another house. The hard way is you decline our offer, we go to court, we initiate condemnation proceedings, We'll litigate for years. You won't get your attorney's fees paid for, and we'll pay you less money anyway after all the fees are considered. So what are you going to do? The easy way or the hard way? Justin?
Yeah. So my question is do they pretty much like lay that all out? Do people know that they have a right to refuse, or is it just sort of one of those things that like?
In so many words, what they basically tell you is, we'd like to buy your home, but if you don't agree, we can exercise eminent domain power.
Okay.
I mean, it's not quite as blunt as I just made it, but you get the picture.
Yeah. It's just one of those things that like you hear the phrase eminent domain unless you're taking a property class. You know, it's one of those things that's a bit nebulous. That,
oh, they'll just say, we'll take your house from you. We'll take your house. So a movie was made about a year ago about the Kelo case called Little Pink House. Did anyone see it? It wasn't very good. I really wanted to love the movie because I love property. Like, I wanted to like it, but it was just a crappy movie. But they actually showed the scene where the government official went to Suzette Kelo's house and said, we really want your property. And she's like, no, get lost. And she came back and said, we really want it. And she's like, get lost. They came back another time and they said, if you don't sell us your property, we'll take eminent domain. And she's like, I don't care. So that's basically what happens. Mike, your hand's up.
Yes, sir. How long of a process is it? Because if the government came knocking on my door, I might sell my house outright to get the profit that I want and let somebody else deal with it. It's like a year or so.
Well, Mike, let me ask this question. If you sell the house to someone, won't they be subject to an eminent domain suit? So you wouldn't tell them, right? You wouldn't tell the person your house is about to be condemned. That's what you're getting at, right? You go to some poor fool. He's laughing. You go to some poor fool's like, hey, you want my house? Screw it. I'm gone. I think I might be wrong about this, Mike, but I think you actually would have to go to the records office and record that you want to take a person's house through eminent domain. That way a prospective buyer isn't cheated by you. I think that's the right answer. I think that's what would happen in realistic, but I'm not positive on that one.
If it's like an initial bargain, like right when they just start, you know, like feeling people out, you know.
I mean, the other side is, you know, if you're so eager to sell, it may be easier to sell to the government than to try and engage in chicanery. Because you might have a fraud action on your hand also, if you think about it.
True. They don't get, a lot of times they won't give you the true price though, correct?
No, and also, Mike, one more point. Usually eminent domain is in economically depressed areas. There's not going to be much demand for the house in general, right? The reason, let me put this bluntly, the reason why these houses were targeted is they were easy to take, right? They weren't valuable, people weren't selling them. So the market was not robust. It was basically a dead market. So I can't imagine.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
It's not like,
I know what you're saying.
Sometimes they'll just put a highway in someplace and it is a good piece of property, but that's where the highway's going to be. So too bad, so sad kind of deal.
Elizabeth asked about the movie Up. If you haven't seen it, it's a Pixar movie where there's a house that they want to basically take, and a guy puts all these balloons on it, and it's a very nice movie. That's actually based on a true story, I think, from Seattle, where a guy refused to sell his house, and they couldn't seize it through eminent domain. So it's like this random house in the middle of a shopping mall. They built a shopping mall around it. It's like just Google it. It's crazy to see. Okay, where am I? Okay, Lacey. Xavier, I think you're next.
Yeah.
All right, Xavier. So we have Suzette Kelo, and she was not interested in selling her house.
No.
No? Why did they say they had to take her house? What were like the reasons they gave her why they needed to take her house?
I think they wanted to, hold on. I think wasn't it primarily for just the development of that area from what I read?
Yeah, Xavier, was there any evidence that the house was maybe blighted or in poor condition or was somehow in bad shape?
The house was fine. They just wanted, I think, the location.
Right. Right, good.
Just to promote development of the city.
Okay, very good. Thank you, Xavier. Usually when you think of condemnation, right, the phrase condemnation, you think of like a broken down house that's in really bad condition, right? It's dilapidated, but that's not what this phrase means, not at all. Condemnation merely refers to taking a person's property. Right? To condemn property isn't a reflection of how the property is in bad shape. To condemn property means you want to seize it through the power of the state, that is, through the power of eminent domain. Okay? Now, this case stretched on forever. I think the litigation was originally began at the end of 2000 in the trial court. And then it took nearly 5 years to get to the U.S. Supreme Court. So it really stretched forever. Lisa asked, did I see Citizen Jane? I did not see that documentary. I'm not sure what it's about. Okay. She writes, fought to preserve urban communities in the face of destructive development projects. I have not seen. I'll take a look at it later. Thank you for the recommendation. All right. The case was 5-4, like most Supreme Court cases you read are. I mean, the majority of Supreme Court cases are actually unanimous. 9-0 is the most common vote on the court, but you only read the 5-4 cases. The majority was by Justice Stevens. You had a concurring opinion by Justice Kennedy. You had one dissent by Justice O'Connor and a second dissent by Justice Thomas. Now, let me give you some of the background of the case that's not, can't be agreeing with Justice Thomas. It happens every once in a while, Andrew. Don't feel bad. Let me give you some of the stuff that's not in the case. Now, if you actually went to visit the block where Kelo's house was, it's basically this huge block. And on the corner of the block was a house called the Italian Dramatic Club. The Italian Dramatic Club. This was a local Politico hangout where all the local politicians would hang out in this house. Now, how is it possible that every single house on this block was demolished except, stop it, Mike, except for the Italian Dramatic Club? The short answer is that the head of this group had a very close relationship with the city. And basically, it's kind of like, don't touch us, right? The head of the club actually got a promise in writing that his private men club would not be demolished. So even though the entire block was knocked down, the Dramatic Club remains. And it's still there to this day. So let me amend my story from before. After I escaped the military parking lot, I drive to the Italian Dramatic Club. Of course, what else would I do? And this was like Sunday morning at 8 a.m. And so I pull into the parking lot and I start taking pictures of the Italian Dramatic Club. And these two dudes in pickup trucks pull up behind me. Oh. And I just got to there. I just drove away at that point. I was like, I can't anymore. But you know, they look the part of people who go to an Italian club in these huge trucks. You know, I am not Italian. No, I'm from Staten Island. I've watched many episodes of Jersey Shore, but I'm not Italian. I got to laugh there. I was like, okay, screw this. Let me go see the feral cats. I didn't actually see any cats. I was disappointed, but the Italian Dramatic Club is still there. Now, why do I give that example? I give that example because it illustrates how political power can be used to fight eminent domain. Invariably, the people who are targeted for eminent domain are those least able to fight it. The city picked this area because it would be an easy fight. It's mostly old people, poor people, whatever. It's not going to be much of a fight. They did not expect a battle all the way to the Supreme Court. They simply thought they'll initiate this stuff in the trial court and they'll be done with it. The difference, though, is that the trial court actually ruled that these takings were unconstitutional, which is why this had to go to the state Supreme Court and then the U.S. Supreme Court. Okay? One other matter I want to discuss, the governor at the time of Connecticut's name was John Rowland, and he was the one who cut this sweet deal with Pfizer. John Rowland was later indicted on federal charges and went to jail for a number of years. He was engaged in some serious corruption. So these sorts of deals are very rarely, kosher, right? Very rarely above board. Usually there's a lot of stuff going on where there's kickback. So for example, Pfizer, who, this huge pharmaceutical company, made a no-interest loan to the New London Development Corporation. They gave him a $150,000 no-interest loan. I'd like one of those now, right? A no-interest loan to push forward this agenda. Of course, irony is not the right word, but the fitting end of this is at the end, Pfizer never actually built this facility. Pfizer acquired Wyeth, which was another pharmaceutical. And Wyeth had a facility very close by. And Pfizer said, yeah, never mind. Whatever. So the lot's still empty. And one of the Connecticut Supreme Court judges actually apologized, said, I'm sorry. One last point. After this case was decided, there were actually people in New Hampshire who tried to use eminent domain to seize Justice Souter's house. And they wanted to turn it into a museum for eminent domain abuse. They were not successful, but they actually tried to get the city to take Justice Souter's barn. Didn't work. All right. So let's walk through Justice Stevens's analysis. Davis, you around? You here, Davis?
Yes, I'm here.
All right. Davis, what? Oh my God, Davis, why? Why, oh my God? That's not his name? It's your name.
Yep, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, Elizabeth is giving you OMGs. All right. Walk me through Justice. That's what she does. That's her thing. Okay. Whatever. Walk me through Justice Stevens's analysis, please, for the majority.
Well, so he said that because there's an economic benefit, that it was that it was for the public purpose, or is it a public purpose because of an economic benefit?
Okay. Well, just take a step back. Does the word public purpose appear in the Fifth Amendment, Davis?
It does not.
What's the word that appears in the Fifth Amendment?
Public use.
Okay, so let's just start there then. How does Justice Stevens go from public use to public purpose? How does he bridge that gap?
He relies on long-standing precedent.
Yeah, and just let me intervene for a second. Thank you, Davis. The precedent he cites isn't actually very long-standing. Stevens cites a couple cases that don't support what he actually had to say. And in fact, Stevens later apologized that he was wrong. So there isn't that much precedent going back to the early 20th century. The precedents he relies on really go back to the 1950s, which is, a long time ago, but not 100 years. So there's one case called Berman v. Parker, which I mentioned, I think, before. In Berman v. Parker, you had a blighted area of D.C., where there was some land that was in good shape and some land that was in bad shape. And the city used eminent domain to take the entire area to make a more attractive community. Now, there was one department store that was in pretty good shape, and it challenged it, saying that my house is not blighted. The majority opinion in Berman was written by Justice William O. Douglas. You might remember Justice Douglas wrote the Long Island case, Village of Belterra v. Boris, the hippies case, the college student case. And Justice Douglas wrote that the concept of public welfare is broad and inclusive. In other words, public use isn't limited to things that are going to be used by the public. Anything that benefits the public is effectively a public use. And it was this case that began to equate public use with public purpose. Right? This was the case that bridged the public use and public purpose gap. So you have Berman v. Parker in 1954. The next case that the court talks about is from 1984, 30 years later. Hawaii Housing Authority versus Midkiff. The facts here are a bit more complicated. The case arose in Hawaii, and Hawaii had a problem. Almost all the land was owned by a few wealthy families. We might call an oligopoly, not a monopoly, but an oligopoly. And the state enacted a law that said if you are renting land, your landlord has to sell it to you. Right? In other words, landlords were required to sell property to their tenants. They didn't have a choice. Right? This was literally taking from the rich and giving to the poor, right? You were forcing sale of property. And the Supreme Court said that was okay. Right? Land oligopoly was an evil, and transferring it was okay because it created a public benefit. Even though the land was being given to private individuals, it was not for public use, that was okay. Now, what's fascinating about the Hawaii Housing Authority case is who joined it. Sandra Day O'Connor was the majority author. She wrote it. And William Rehnquist was also in the majority. In this case, both Rehnquist and O'Connor were in dissent. So they see some distinction between Hawaii Housing Authority and Berman v. Parker. But once you get to Berman v. Parker and Hawaii Housing Authority, you've already broken the dam. Public use and public purpose are now synonymous. And once you accept that a public purpose, something that benefits the public, is valid, it's very hard to rule against this case. Okay, so Colleen, are you here?
I'm here.
Okay, thank you, Colleen. So, Colleen, what exactly was the public purpose here with this use of eminent domain?
So, I'm sorry. What? I guess I thought.
What was the public benefit by seizing Kelo's home? Just be precise here.
You mean that the city can't take the property under the pretext of the public?
No. We'll get to pretext in a few minutes, but on its face, what did the lawyers from New London say was the public benefit here, the public purpose?
You mean like the tests?
You're thinking about this way too hard, right? What did New London say in court was the reason why they're doing this? What was their public purpose? What reason did they give in court?
So I think because this is because of the research facility, right?
And what would the research facility lead to?
More money.
How more money? In what way?
I mean, especially in, I guess, taxes on the facility.
Taxes, right? Colleen, which type of property would generate more taxes? Suza Kelo's little pink house, or like this huge Pfizer research facility?
The research facility.
Very good, right? Thank you, Colleen. The argument here was that economic redevelopment was a public purpose, right? It would increase the tax base. It would lead to more jobs. People would now work in this facility, right? And also would just make the community nicer, right? Having, a research hub creates innovation, science, whatever, right? People are attracted to it. So the public purpose, the government said, was we want to generate more taxes, new jobs, and new revenue. Okay, Catherine, you here? Kate? Yeah, you're on mute. Oh, I still can't hear you. I know you're talking. Try pulling out your mic.
Yeah.
Oh yes, you're loud and clear. Yeah, sometimes the mics don't work on this thing. You actually have to go to your preferences and make sure you have the right mic selected. All right, Kate, I'm sorry, I said Catherine, I'm sorry. Kate, let me ask you this question. Was the city actually trying to increase their tax base and increase jobs?
Well, didn't they wanted to buy it because of the Pfizer development?
Well, in other words, was the reason the court gave the real reason that they were trying to increase taxes? Was that a lie? Were they lying to the court?
No.
Was it true?
Yes.
Okay. So then what's the problem here, right? If they were actually trying to increase taxes, then why is Justice Stevens wrong? If the reason they gave is the true reason, then what's the problem here?
I have on my note that taking must be reasonable for public use. Then well, if it's for public purpose, then it is for public use and it falls within the Fifth Amendment.
So then what's the problem? Is Justice Stevens right? But in other words, if the city was honest and we want to take your home because it'll generate more taxes, then what's the problem? Why is this case so controversial? This should be an easy case. After Berman v. Parker and the Hawaii case, isn't this straightforward?
Not sure. Oh, is it because it's, well, like Mike said, is it because it's private property?
Yeah, but look, they took all the people in Hawaii. They took their property, made them give it up. In other words, you may think this case is awful, but is this really much different from what happened in Berman and Hawaii Housing Authority?
Is it hold on. Is it because they're redistributing it to another private?
Look, the Hawaii Housing Authority, they said if you are a landlord, you have to sell your property to your tenant. Isn't that taking from A and giving to B?
Would it be because that there's like different purpose to it, like increasing taxes, giving jobs?
Is that a bad thing? You have an economically depressed city. Why shouldn't a city be able to take a city out of this, depressed condition?
Because it's probably giving a lot of power.
So what? Is that bad? Government can't have power? Let me take a step back. This case was actually harder than it may seem, right? Usually when I teach this case to students, like, oh my God, this case has to be wrong. I'm like, okay, why? Okay, we're not Soviets, too much power in government hands, Motel 6, Ritz-Carlton, I got all that stuff, right? But let's take a step back. You're arguing this case for Souza Kelo. What line do you draw? Right? What line do you draw? Desiree, you here?
Yeah.
Okay, so let me ask you this question, Desiree. Do you go into court if you're the lawyer for Kelo and say we want to overrule the Hawaii case, Hawaii Housing Authority, and we want to overrule, Berman v. Parker? Is that what you say as you go to court?
No, and in your video, Kelo's attorney said they didn't want to. They just wanted them to take the situation differently than those situations.
Yeah. Okay, so someone did their homework. Thank you. I'm glad you watched the video. See, when you watch the videos, you get the answers. I'm not that original. So Desiree, they didn't go into court and say we want to overrule a 50-year-old case, right? They didn't say that. What kind of line do they want to draw? What did the Kelo lawyer's argument say was, this is different? Why is this case different? Why is this case different?
I know we made the argument that in this case, you're giving someone's actual used residence, like their private property, over to another private entity, and the city tried to say that it was different, but the lawyer made the argument that you can have a school, a church, a shopping mall on the block, and those will revenue tax dollars just as much as this business would. So they're just saying, what's the difference, I guess? Yeah.
So thank you, Desiree. I think the problem here, and I know the lawyer who argued this case. He's an old friend, Scott Bullock, very good lawyer. He was in a tough spot, right? He couldn't go to court and say, Your Honor, I want you to overrule 50 years of precedent. Like, you can't do that. If you do that, you're going to lose. Unless you have 9 Justice Thomases, that's not going to work, right? Because at least most of the court has some respect for stare decisis. I'm with Thomas for what it's worth. I'd overrule all these cases, but that's not the rule we have. When you have precedent in the way, you're sort of stuck. So the lawyer for Souza Kelo made this argument. He said that economic development is not a public use, right? In Berman v. Parker, you have to have a balanced community. Okay, that's okay. In the Hawaii case, you have to break up a land oligopoly. Oh, that's okay. But economic development is not a public use. That's a very hard line to draw, right? Because if you can make someone give up their property and sell it to a tenant, then why can't someone make you sell your property and give it to Pfizer, right? They're not that far apart. And indeed, the Kelo case was even tougher because it wasn't selling it from Suze Kelo to Pfizer. It was Kelo selling it to the city, and the city would sell it to Pfizer. Right? In other words, the city was the middleman. In Hawaii, it was a direct transfer. The city wasn't even it was from A to B. Right? Here, you actually had a middleman, which was the city, and they could sell it to the Pfizer, maybe lease it perhaps. So this was a hard case. Everyone hates this case. Hell, I hate this case. I think it's an awful case. But the rule itself is a lot tougher, which is why Justice Stevens basically says, this is consistent with precedent, right? This is consistent with precedent. And indeed, there's some evidence that this transfer would actually increase property values. What did we talk about zoning? Increasing property values is a reason to have zoning, right? That's why we have all these zoning laws, keep property values high. So if you hate this case, you hate zoning law also, because it's really one and the same, right? What can the state do to your property to keep prices high? All right. Questions on Justice Stevens' majority opinion so far? We're not done with it yet. We'll get there almost in a minute. But any questions so far on Stevens?
I have kind of a question.
Sure.
It would be more of like an opinion on your end.
So
like,
I'll go for it. I'll see what I can do.
Just so like with how you're saying that like even Justice Stevens is apologizing for.
No. I'm sorry. It wasn't Stevens. It was actually a justice in the Connecticut Supreme Court who apologized.
Oh, okay.
But Stevens admitted that he got the 100-year thing wrong. He acknowledged that was not correct.
Okay. But with it just how unpopular this is as an opinion, and there was a pretty clear right-wing, left-wing split on the court. Do you think if something like this were to come up again, that it's possible that this whole idea of public purpose will be gone at some point, or is it?
Yeah. Just let me answer your question. This decision was unpopular with everyone, right? Conservatives hated it, liberals hated it, right? You have, basically Rush Limbaugh and Al Sharpton holding hands in this case. Everyone hated this case. There are very few issues that have such a unique consensus across the political aisle. Now you ask, will the court overrule Kelo? If I had to pick any case aside in the last 15 years that might be overruled, this would be my top 5. But let me put a caveat to this. After Kelo was decided, many states enacted reforms to try to make it harder to seize property. This was so unpopular that almost every state, I think, let me get the numbers for you, 42 states out of 50 enacted some laws within 2 years of Kelo. Now, most of those laws were actually pretty stupid. 15 of them actually had strength, and the rest were kind of, meaningless. They didn't really do much. So, for example, Texas passed Amendment 11, which, let me make sure I get it right. It forbids takings where the primary purpose is economic development or enhancement of tax revenue. Again, one more time. The Texas law prohibits takings for the primary purpose of economic development or enhancement of tax revenues. But, and here's the big caveat, you can still take property for what's called blight, B-L-I-G-H-T, blight. Unfortunately, in Texas, the definition of blight is very broad. In fact, almost anything is blight, right? If something creates, quote, an economic liability, it's blight. So if you can take property for an economic liability, you're basically back in Kelo land. So Texas's law is more or less, we're back in Kelo. But the holding of the case, and I'll answer Catherine's question, is that the court's deferential. The court will not scrutinize the public purpose asserted by the government. So long as the public purpose stated is reasonable, that's enough to satisfy the Fifth Amendment. That's a public use. Right? Let me jump back to the top of the list. Allah, are you over here?
Yes, sir.
Allah, does it matter if the government's projections of taxing of higher taxes are correct? Does the government have to be accurate that this will actually generate money? In other words, we have an empty lot there, right? I went there, visited, took some pictures of the cats. It's completely empty, generates zero tax revenue. Does it matter if the government's wrong with their predictions?
I'd say no.
No. Is a court going to demand any sort of evidence or proof they'll generate revenue?
No.
No, that's right. Thank you, Allah. Rebecca asks, the government can make a weak argument and not even call it public use, and that's enough. You're right. This is effectively a rational basis review standard where the government doesn't have to give the actual reason or just even any evidence. They can say, here's what we think is reasonable, and that's enough. Here's our rational goal, and that's enough. And what Stevens does in Kelo is they apply rational basis review. And as a result, the court upholds this taking. Right? It's an act of deference. All right. Now, the court does acknowledge there may be some limits. Right? AJ, are you over here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Thank you. AJ, what would happen? I'll just give you a hypothetical, right? What if instead of taking the entire block, they just took Susan Kelo's house, right? They just took one house and they left all the houses next door. And they just took one house and that was it. Do you think Justice Stevens would approach the case the same way?
No.
Why not? What would happen if you had like a one-to-one transfer? They basically said, okay, we're going to take Suzette's house and give it to someone else who wants a pink house. Would that be, why would that be different?
Than the former precedent that they were relying on for this case. Taking one thing as opposed to taking a block for general public use isn't the same.
Right. When you take for the entire block, what does that suggest you have? What generally when you target an entire block, what are you acting based on? What would we call that? What's that word? Right? Do we just take randomly property at random?
Oh, for specific use?
Right, but if we're taking a specific block, generally what kind of work do we do beforehand? What would you call that?
I hate to say background work or research.
And what do you generate with that research? What would you call it? It begins with a P. Oh, you're going to hate yourself in a second.
Probably.
A plan.
A plan? Oh,
yeah. Okay. Yeah, a plan, a comprehensive plan. Justice Stevens suggests that when you have a thank you, AJ, when you have a comprehensive plan, right, that the government was not acting randomly, that they had something specific that they were trying to accomplish. And Stevens says here they had a plan, they did all this research, they did all this planning, etc. That eliminates any possible suspicions. Justice Kennedy wrote a concurring opinion, as he would often do. And Justice Kennedy said that rational basis review is valid here, right? We can use it. But you may have an unconstitutional taking if there's evidence that the government tried to favor a particular party, right? That the benefit to the public was secondary, that they were trying to basically benefit one particular person. Right? What might be evidence that they were acting for a particular person's benefit? There was no plan. If there's no comprehensive plan, then it kind of seems random. and that they're not actually acting for the public good. They're just targeting someone, maybe for malice or spite. So the Kennedy concurring opinion was really designed to say, when is rational basis review no longer appropriate? When there's evidence that this was targeting only, a specific person. Is there any evidence they targeted Suzette Kelo alone? No. They targeted her entire block. The entire block was wiped out. So here, there was enough of a plan that made Justice Kennedy okay with the taking. All right, questions on the majority or Justice Kennedy? Anything on the
I have a question that I don't know how to raise my hand.
I'll tell you. There's a button that says raise hand. Do you see that? If you click participants, there's a button that says raise hand.
Gotcha.
Okay, but you go ahead.
Okay. We're focusing on the taking part of it, but what about the just compensation? Because I feel like everybody has a price, and if this was such a hated opinion, if the compensation was truly just, maybe it would not be so looked down upon.
Do you think there's any
Because
price?
The government purpose, I mean, a blighted area is not, to me, an inherently bad thing, right? So if they were truly justly compensating her for her property, I don't see why that's such a bad thing.
So, Davis, let me ask you this question. You think there'd be any price that Suzette Kelo would have accepted?
Probably not.
Well, I like your hesitation. Everyone has a price, right? I mean, we all say, "Oh, I can't be bought." Yes, you can. Right? Everyone, everyone has a price. Just figuring out what that number is: $1 million, $2 million, $5 million. I mean, everyone has a price. I mean, think of a show like Survivor, like these reality shows. People do humiliating things for money. Everyone has a price. But there are going to be some people who've lived there their entire lives who probably would say, "I'm about to die. I don't want to move. Screw you. Get lost. I have no price." The compensation the government gives is a hell of a lot less than that. They do not actually give fair compensation. It's something much less. Tom says, "I can totally be bought. I'll pack now." Yes. With all of your toilet paper, you can definitely be bought with your pallets of toilet paper. No one doubt that, Tom. Other questions on the majority opinion of Justice Stevens' concurrence? I'm sorry, Justice Kennedy's concurrence. I think I saw a hand a minute ago from Justin. No, you're good? Okay. Anything else on the majority or the concurrence by Justice Kennedy? Okay, who is that? Mac, do you want to just, this is long, you want to just talk to us for a minute? I can't read all that.
Sure. So I was just a little unclear on how the rational basis review still was upheld. I mean, the only kind of justification they give for that is that it's not targeted. So I was just thinking, isn't the inalienability of your property rooted in the distribution and all that? I mean, why is it not a different standard?
What did I tell you last class about Justice Kennedy's and tiers of standards of review?
They're no longer applicable.
Yep, don't matter at all. Kennedy does not like tiers of reviews. I'm sorry, standards of review, to use your phrase. He doesn't care about them. But I'll make this point more bluntly. Footnote 4 of Caroline Product says you have heightened review when laws infringe on specific guarantees in the Bill of Rights. The Takings Clause is in the Bill of Rights. By any standard, the Takings Clause should get as much scrutiny as a random due process case involving some unenumerated right. It doesn't. Which is why I think if I was arguing this case, I screw it, overrule Berman, overrule Midkiff. These cases are wrong. Go back to 50, 150 years, whatever it is, they're all wrong. But once you can see that Hawaii Housing Authority is correct, and once you can see that Berman v. Parker is correct, your hands are tied, right? You're basically arguing that you're stuck in the rational basis review standard once you accept those cases. And that's why the case follows that precedent. Mac, does that answer your question a little bit? Hell, I'd go back to Calder v. Bull from the 1800s. Just go back to Calder v. Bull. I'd be happy to go back to that case. Justice Chase was right. Wrong on some other things, but at least right on this. By the way, Justice Chase, who wrote Calder v. Bull, is the only Supreme Court justice who was impeached. He wasn't removed, but he was put to an impeachment trial. Okay. Any other questions in the majority or the concurrence? All right, let's talk about the dissents for a minute, which are not in your book, I don't think, but I have you read them, the little excerpt. Justice O'Connor had a very memorable line where she said, with this standard, anyone's house can be taken, right? You can take anyone's house, make a Motel 6, or you can make it into a Ritz-Carlton hotel, right? Anyone's property is now subject to seizure so long as you can increase the tax base of the property. O'Connor also explains that when you have these sorts of takings, the people who are most vulnerable are those with the least political power. And I think we saw this with the Italian Dramatic Club. Next, O'Connor says that there's not really any power to scrutinize these sorts of comprehensive plans, right? And let me just give you an example. Let's say that the City of New London decided, you know what, we don't really care about the tax base. We just want to give this to Pfizer, right? That's our real reason. We don't really care about taxes. We don't care about jobs. Do you think any government person would be stupid enough to put that in a public document, right? Would any member of the government put in a document, we don't care about taxes, we just want to help our buddies out at Pfizer? No, of course not, right? No one's dumb enough to do that. They can all say, well, we have this plan, a comprehensive plan, and we're going to do this and this and this. Completely unrealistic plans, right? It'll never happen, but we have this plan. And O'Connor says, so long as you have this ability to sort of paper over the truth, right, you'll never find out what the real purpose is. Of course, the tension is that Justice O'Connor wrote Hawaii Housing Authority versus Mitgiff. And she kind of says, well, there was some dicta in Mitgiff, right? I don't want to talk about it. She wrote it. She wouldn't acknowledge she was wrong. She was she's still alive, quite old now, but she was very stubborn. And she wouldn't acknowledge her error, but I think she realized her mistake was, her decision was an error. She's quite ill now. She has basically advanced Alzheimer's or dementia, depending how you call it. And she's withdrawn from public life, so she's not public anymore. But she had a remarkable life. Let me just tell you a little bit of O'Connor while I have you. Maybe you knew this, maybe you didn't. She went to law school with Chief Justice Rehnquist. They were in the same class. She graduated, I think Rehnquist graduated first in his class, and then O'Connor was third in her class. Rehnquist went to clerk for Justice Jackson, the Supreme Court. Remember Justice Jackson? And O'Connor couldn't get a job because at the time women weren't hired in legal jobs. The story goes that she apparently got a job she would only offer a job as a legal secretary. That was the only job she could get at the time. She eventually found her way into state government. She worked in the state courts in Arizona. And President Reagan promised to put a woman on the Supreme Court. That was one of his campaign promises. And when the first vacancy opened up, he put O'Connor on the Supreme Court. And she served for almost 30 years. She retired fairly young. She retired in 2004, 2005, so almost 15 years ago. At the time, her husband had been suffering from dementia, and she basically retired to take care of him. The saddest part about all this is that her husband's dementia increased, and he forgot who she was. Yeah, it sucks. And they had to put him into a home, and he actually found another girl and started another girlfriend because he just forgot who O'Connor was. It's heartbreaking. Every time I tell this story, I want to cry. And O'Connor herself has now come to dementia. So she retired way too early. She was not ready. She still had a lot of life in her. One last story, though, about O'Connor. It was always known that O'Connor and Rehnquist dated when they were in law school, right? It was always known that they dated each other, but we never knew quite how much. Apparently, they went out on about 100 dates. Rehnquist and O'Connor went on like 100 dates. It was very intense back then. It was like basically a courting process. And here's the best part. Ready for this? Who's counting? Apparently O'Connor. I'll tell you why she was counting. Rehnquist, while he was clerking at the Supreme Court, sent a letter to O'Connor on Supreme Court stationery. He proposed to her by letter on Supreme Court stationery. And know what she did? Turned his ass down. She said no. She said no. She dumped him. And then she went on to marry a guy named John O'Connor. And they had a very happy, long marriage. But then, fast forward 40 years, when Reagan was looking for a woman to put in the Supreme Court, he asked Rehnquist, and who did Rehnquist say? Go call Sandra. So it's amazing. They worked. Can you imagine going out 100 dates with someone, dumping his ass, and then being as a colleague on the Supreme Court? Can you imagine that? Yes. Apparently they're saying yes. Let me give you one more story. This is a good story. In the mid-90s, the Supreme Court had a case involving internet pornography. Right? Internet pornography. Neither Rehnquist nor O'Connor had any idea what internet pornography was. This was, I think, in 95 or 96. So they actually had the court librarian wheel a computer into their office to show them internet pornography. So imagine you have Rehnquist and O'Connor in their office watching internet porn. And this is like dial-up stuff. This is old, right? This is in the mid-90s. And by the way, Ted Cruz was clerking this term, so he was there also. And then the story goes, O'Connor was watching the internet porn, and she said, oh my. And apparently, eventually, O'Connor and Rehnquist, they wrote a concurrence where they said, well, we agree the First Amendment protects us stuff, but this is really bad stuff. So they were obviously traumatized by it. Okay, I'm not even going to read the chat now. I don't even want to see what's going on right now. It's bad. Anyway, any questions on O'Connor? She had an amazing life. I always try to mention at this point in the class. I think it's fun to mention. Okay. All right, let me do Justice Thomas's dissent now and let you guys go. Justice Thomas had mostly an agreement with O'Connor, but unlike O'Connor, Thomas would overrule Hawaii Housing Authority. He said that public use is not public purpose, and he would reverse Hawaii Housing Authority, he would reverse Berman versus Parker, and he would not apply rational basis review. He's right. This is an enumerated right and should not be treated as an unenumerated right. Thomas also had a racial component to his opinion, where statistically, eminent domain takings focus on people who are not white, people who are not educated. Minority communities are destroyed by eminent domain. And there's this phrase, urban renewal was often called Negro removal. And there was entire ways to happen, what they call slum clearance. Basically used eminent domain to force African Americans out of inner cities and put them out, whoever, doesn't really matter where they go. And this was a very concerted effort. This wasn't inadvertent. It was often racially motivated, that they targeted communities to get them out of their neighborhoods. It was quite deliberate. And Thomas says that it's predictable that Kelo will make these situations worse. In Kelo, the NAACP, AARP, and the Southern Christian Leadership Council agreed that this will harm minorities, the elderly, and the economic underprivileged. And I think Thomas is more or less right about this, and the numbers back him up. Okay. Questions on the Thomas dissent? Anyone in the Thomas dissent? It's almost 9. Everyone's, get out of here. All right, let me wrap up, and if you want, I'll be happy to stick around a few minutes afterwards and answer questions. The Kelo decision was unpopular, but it's still good law. In many states, there are additional state constitutional protections that make it harder to seize property, but as a general matter, courts are deferential. I think at some point this case might be overruled. I think it's a decent chance to get 5 votes to at least kill the economic development line. That is, overrule Hawaii Housing Authority in part, perhaps not entirely. Okay, any questions on Kelo? The class for Thursday, Waji asked, should we discuss Kennedy concurrence? Yes, talk about all of them. That'll make me very happy. The class on Thursday begins a new topic, what are called regulatory takings. Why regulatory? Because a person gets to keep title to their property, but the government regulates how they use their property. And the next topic is, when does a regulation diminish property value so much they have to pay compensation? Okay? All right. I'm going to end this meeting, and I'll come right back in. If you have any office hour questions, I'll stick around for a while. Otherwise, I'll see you all on Thursday. If you want to email me, I have more time for you. Okay. Adios. Thank you. Bye.